America is bitterly divided over politics, and at How Do We Fix It, we've been looking for ways to push back. Many of the conversations we've had during the past 9 years have touched on how to disagree better and listen with greater care to those who see the world very differently from how we do. In coming episodes, we'll be reporting on the people, work, and ideas of the grassroots cross-partisan group called Braver Angels. They bring liberals, conservatives, and independents together. Some of the projects they're working on are groundbreaking and exciting. In this episode, we hear from Braver Angels Senior Fellow Monica Guzmán.
When you want to ask why people believe what they believe, instead ask how they came to believe what they believe. When you ask people how instead of why, you're asking for their story. You're asking them to tell you, moments or scenes that play in their head as they imagine what they think about abortion or gun regulations or elections or what have you. What's in your head? What do you remember? What images from the past come up? Tell me about those.
Our show is about fixes.
Yeah, how to make the world a better place.
How do we fix it?
How do we fix it?
Those of us who are kind of pissed off with politics are sometimes called the exhausted majority. The rhetoric has become more toxic than ever, it seems, and this year's presidential campaign could be even nastier than any of those we've had to suffer through in recent years. Political and cultural polarization is not only breaking up friendships and weakening many community and family ties, it also makes it profoundly more difficult to get things done. I mean, think of how much progress there could be on immigration, guns, and the environment, for example, if we'd stop speaking in slogans and listen to one another. There is a better way to fix our problems. Our guest, Braver Angels Senior Fellow Monica Guzmán, has some suggestions about how to have better conversations. This loving liberal daughter of conservative immigrant parents who came to the U.S. from Mexico is a bridge builder, a journalist, an author. Her podcast is called A Braver Way, and her recent book is called I Never Thought of It That Way. This interview that we had with Móni was recorded a couple of years ago. So here are some highlights. First question, why does toxic polarization matter?
I think of it as the problem that eats all other problems. It's the sludge at the base of everything else. On a social level, it constrains our creativity. We're so divided, we're blinded. We can't see the issues that we need to wrestle with clearly enough to wrestle with them well. We end up creating policies on a governmental level that can be really reactionary, based more on fear than a genuine engagement with stakeholders and their concerns. And then on a personal level, I'm hearing a lot of pain out there. Relationships that mean something to people, but that then have to end. Somebody burns the bridge. Someone feels they have to. There's no other choice. These differences are just too big. And then what happens is the glue that holds our society together starts to weaken and weaken and weaken.
You talked about burning bridges, building bridges. Does that mean compromising our beliefs, all meeting in the middle?
No. We conflate conversation and engagement with endorsement and agreement, as if we're that vulnerable. As if just hearing somebody out or engaging them is already agreeing or endorsing. And it's not. It's really not. But I think that it makes a lot of sense that we carry that fear because we're living at a time where it appears a lot of toxic ideas are gaining steam, depending on what side you are on. The other side has just fallen prey to nonsense. And so no wonder we're that afraid of ideas.
Okay, say I'm a progressive and you're a conservative. Are our views of the other side wrong? I mean, if we had an accurate view of what others really felt, would we be as divided as we are now?
No, we would not be. We would not be as divided if we had a clear view of how the other side felt, because what we see in the social science research when we ask people, what do you think the other side believes, is alarming exaggerations. And those exaggerations justify our deep suspicion and fear. And a lot of our division is based on how we feel about each other and how we think the other side feels about us. And when that's exaggerated, it motivates behaviors that are actually not that justified.
Many of us, including a bunch of my friends, are just not that interested in people they disagree with. Why should we make a conscious effort not to silo ourselves?
Yeah, lots of reasons. If we care about thinking for ourselves, I believe that there is a mandate that that person get out of their silo. Because if you stay in your silo, the factory settings here are that you will miss so much. Whatever you think, it will get hard to know if you really think it, or if you've subscribed to the package deal. A lot of the voices in your silo will not prime you to challenge yourself. And so if you value that, if you value staying sharp, then be interested in getting out of your silo.
Let's get personal. You're pretty passionate about this, and you're the daughter of Mexican immigrants. Mm-hmm. They voted for Trump. You vote Democrat. Tell us why you became so interested in this topic of reaching across divides.
It was a slow burn for a while. One of the main threads really was my relationship with my parents. They became citizens in the year 2000, and I became citizen automatically because I was 17, and that's how it works. And they immediately became Republicans. And so it's been 22 years of wrestling with the big political divide between them and myself. And the time that got really tough for me, where it started to feel like I couldn't ignore this, was the 2015 presidential campaign, but really more after the 2016 election. I live in Seattle. Seattle is a highly democratic, liberal place. And at that time, it was a very anxious time if you were in an urban liberal city. And people would bring up headlines and try to bond over our anxiety and our outrage. And I would hear people inevitably start to say things about people who voted for Trump that made me feel personally implicated, because I love two people who voted for Trump dearly, dearly. And I was starting to get this sense that at this point, what we liberals need to do is just completely shun or completely convert, or just, this monstrosity that's happened to our country is what I was hearing. And I knew it was wrong. And that's where it felt like, okay, we got to work on this.
And how's it been going? With your parents? I mean, do you talk politics with them?
Oh, all the time. So I've been on a book tour, and they joined me in Washington, D.C. They live in North Carolina now. And so, we stayed in the same hotel room for several days. And there were at least 3 big political conversations with my mom and dad. And it was awesome. Yeah, we still do it. We learn a lot from it. And the other thing is, this is kind of a fun little aside too, is my dad writes songs in his retirement. He's written more and more of them. He wrote a song about the book and shared the music and lyrics with me maybe 2 weeks ago.
Is it called I Never Thought of It That Way?
It is. So with my parents, it's been going well. It feels like we almost are more eager than before to explore each other's perspectives.
In your book, there's a story about what happened right after the 2016 election, I believe, when you and some friends or colleagues in Seattle, mostly liberal or progressive, were in a state of shock about Trump winning. It was like, we don't know anybody who voted for Trump. Mm-hmm. And you went and found some, didn't you?
Yeah. So what we wanted to do was help people get curious about people who made a very different choice with the people who made a very different choice in a culture that was less familiar. So we made that a priority, and we ended up organizing a visit to Sherman County, Oregon, in partnership with a wonderful lifelong agricultural agent in the county. It's a highly agricultural county. And his name is Sandy. And it was a completely partnered thing. It took a long time to plan, but we did it. And we had about 20 people from Seattle go and meet about 20 people from Sherman County. This is a small county in the county seat of Morrow, which has something like 200 people in it.
And I imagine most of the people there voted for Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It in the voting records in 2016, it was 74% of Sherman County voted for Trump, and 74% of King County, where Seattle sits, voted for Clinton. So they were our nearest mirror opposite county.
Why was it remarkable? What happened that surprised you?
So one of the things that I noticed was that I had this assumption that even though those of us from the city didn't encounter a lot of agriculture, a lot of farm, I realized I still had this assumption that the folks in Sherman County had more to learn from us than we had to learn from them. That I realized what a self-serving assumption that was. One of the things that really struck me was the contrast. They go to cities all the time. Their children go to college in cities. Many of their relatives have left Sherman County because the farming economy makes it tough for everybody to have their own patch of land. We're talking about thousands of acres, per farm. So they all go to cities. They know what it's like. They're very familiar with it. But nobody from Seattle ever comes to Sherman County to check it out, to visit, to learn. So that really struck me and stood out to me, that they were just kind of stunned that we were even there. And in at least one person, a farmer named Darren, who I talked to later, he told me about how during that trip, he was so eager to try to say everything to us. But he saw it as sort of our one chance to tell these city folks about us. Because they never come. They have no idea. All they know is from the media. And so, yeah, their lifestyle is so little understood and so little seen by a lot of the power brokers in urban America.
Does that point to a broader problem for liberals especially, that not only do we fail to understand people who are not like us, but we're also kind of dismissive of them. And we think we know the answers. And why can't these people just, understand what's obvious to us?
Absolutely. Yes. And maybe I wouldn't have been so emphatic about that before, but now I do think that's an enormous problem. I do think there is this bias about urban living, right? That is this assumption that because I'm so well read, I know everything I need to know about everything, and I think we have this bias that people themselves are not sources of learning, so long as you have your books and your theories and you check in with academia and you follow the news, then that's it. That's all you really need. And I think that is so misguided. I've really come around to this, that kind of smarts has nothing to do with what it takes to build a good society. The primary thing in building a good society is being able to put your concerns on the table, understand and see everyone's stake, and then be able to find the best balance that optimizes for everything. That's really hard, and we have to do it over and over again in good governance. It's not about being book smart.
How important is curiosity?
Yeah, it's everything. Curiosity is a state of mind that you can turn on. You can willingly make yourself curious. It can help us see a different way and get us out of the win-lose mode or the attack-defense mode that gets us repeating these toxic cycles.
Are conversations, individual conversations, one-on-one, the best way to overcome polarization?
Yes. The only context where we have our full arsenal of communication tool available is the in-person conversation. You mentioned the one-on-one conversation. The one-on-one conversation is extremely powerful because it's maximum engagement between two minds. When it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 100 people, well, there's more sort of passive listening that has to happen and less engagement where you're really kind of mining each other for insights. But the other thing is that, especially now, when so much of our discourse on controversial things happens in platforms where there's a bunch of invisible audiences, when we talk with someone on those platforms in that open space, we're not actually just talking to them. We're talking to a bunch of invisible people. And what that'll do is it will constrain us. It will make us perform perspectives that feel safe rather than explore perspectives we actually hold. So we're not going to get to candor, and we're not going to get as easily to vulnerability either.
Having these difficult conversations, is there a specific roadmap? Are there how-to tips? Or is it more just bringing your vulnerability, your honesty, your humility to the table in an open-minded, respectful way?
There is no script here. Really, it's about using the how-to tips in order to get familiar. It's like training wheels, familiar with the overall approach and mindset that you described. But we can talk about some of the how-tos because I think some of them are really important.
Yeah, tell us just 2 or 3 tips that we can use.
So I think among the most helpful, one is when you want to ask why people believe what they believe, instead ask how they came to believe what they believe. When you ask people how instead of why, you're asking for their story. You're asking them to tell you, moments or scenes that play in their head as they imagine what they think about abortion or gun regulations or elections or what have you. What's in your head? What do you remember? What images from the past come up? Tell me about those. And then what people do is they take you on a tour instead of you putting them on trial. That's the thing you want to avoid. As curious and wonderful as the question why is, in contexts of distrust, it can often just get people's guard up and put you into that place where you're really just trying to defend yourselves at all costs, at which point you're not really focused on learning and understanding anymore.
Asking how but not why is a good tip. It kind of accepts the need for storytelling.
Exactly. Yeah. Storytelling, we do underestimate its power. Take steps back and be like, how did you get to this? And what you'll learn in their stories is about concerns, not facts about the world. It's their own personal concerns. And that is a better channel to understanding. In my experience, if people feel respected and heard, they don't necessarily mind people asking about the things they care about most. They just have to feel respected and heard, and that's the hardest part.
what's your number one tip for how we make a little progress on this in our own lives?
If you ask one more question before you jump in with your opinion, if you decide to engage on a tough topic one time when you otherwise wouldn't, or if you decide to keep a relationship that you otherwise would have dropped, but you keep it, that is also a step toward curiosity. That itself is enough. This is not about waking up tomorrow and being a Zen master of intellectual humility with everyone that you talk to. This is about if everyone takes one step, and it can really just be not burning the bridge that we were otherwise going to burn, using a little courage, having a little courage and patience with each other. That's really enough.
Monica Guzmán on How Do We Fix It? Her book is I Never Thought of It That Way. Her podcast is called A Braver Way. And it's kind of a compliment to what we're doing here at How Do We Fix It? We report on the work of braver angels. A Braver Way, her podcast, shares ideas and even advice about how to navigate rigid divides. Their latest show came out earlier this week. One of the guests is Sam Rechek, who started a cross-partisan discussion forum at, wait for it, a college campus, the place where bringing the left and right together for impassioned conversations might be harder than almost anywhere else. Sam shared some of what he learned from those weekly sessions, such as the importance of humility and humor.
And you remember this like insight that you have forgotten, that disagreeing is fun. Arguing, providing like reasons for people or for the views you have, and then finding that someone thinks differently and they have reasons and you find them silly and you can call them out on their silly reasons. Like it's fun.
Sam's group that was founded at the University of South Florida is called First Amendment Forum. The name is a tip of the hat to the Constitution's protection of free speech. His group tried to work hard to make sure that everyone at their meetings felt heard.
One of the sort of like core insights that we tried to instill amongst the members was that nobody's unqualified to talk about what the right thing to do is. So if you can try to find a way that people can enter into the conversation, they'll realize that this insecurity that I haven't read enough, I'm not qualified to talk about this, it's not as grounded in truth as they think it is.
Yeah. And I love that you've mentioned now the second, controversial statement, I suppose, in some circles, the first being disagreeing is fun. The second being no one's unqualified to discuss issues that affect us as a society. Oof.
No one's, certainly to discuss, to discuss the things that affect all of us as a society. Maybe I'm unqualified as a student to be in a position of implementation of those, the conclusions that we've reached. Maybe, there's a little bit more to that, but all we're doing is discussing it. Nobody's unqualified for that.
So clearly First Amendment, free speech, I know because I've talked to you about this before, matters a lot to you. So this became the name and part of the heart of the First Amendment Forum. Why?
That's right. And that's because the First Amendment is a part of our Constitution because of the philosophical ideas underpinning it. This idea that the search for truth is best pursued on the basis of a vast variety of competing perspectives.
Sam Rechek speaking with Móni Guzmán on the podcast A Braver Way. Find their episodes wherever you listen to podcasts or at the Braver Angels website, which is braverangels.org. I'm Richard Davies on How Do We Fix It? We have more episodes on the work, people, and ideas of Braver Angels coming up. Our producer is Miranda Schaefer, and this show is a production of Davies Content. We make podcasts for nonprofit groups in the bridging community. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.